Okay, I want you to start this deep dive by imagining what feels like an almost absurd publishing scenario. Picture a book, maybe published half a decade ago, just sitting quietly on shelves. It did okay, moderately successful, but definitely not trending. Then boom, a single, maybe 20-second video clip goes viral. And it's not some slick ad, it's just a regular person sitting in their bedroom, maybe completely overcome with emotion, showing the cover of the book and literally crying over the ending. And suddenly that 5-year-old book, it shoots straight to the top of like every global bestseller list. That right there, that's the power of BookTok we're talking about today. So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack the whole life cycle of this platform, how TikTok has, well, completely transformed the publishing industry, how it's redefined word-of-mouth marketing, and basically rewritten the rules, the economics even, of what it means to be a bestseller today.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating looking at the sources is that they really detail the complete story. You see it go from these unexpected kind of niche grassroots origins all the way to full, almost frantic industry adoption.
Mm.
And of course, the controversies that inevitably followed.
Right.
But the core insight, I think we need to establish this right up front, is that this isn't just, another marketing channel. It's a fundamental power shift. It's a story about genuine, decentralized reader enthusiasm, just overwhelming and ultimately steering the very polished, very controlled levers of traditional marketing.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism then.
Yeah.
We need to pinpoint the origin story. And it seems intrinsically linked to TikTok's own massive growth, right?
Yeah.
The niche really started forming around 2020.
Exactly, and fueled in large part by the pandemic.
Yeah.
Everyone was stuck at home, looking for community, and frankly, looking for something good to read.
Right.
And the initial activity was just pure. It wasn't professional reviewers. It wasn't authors pushing their own stuff. It was readers sharing these short videos, focusing on really visceral, emotional reactions, the kind we instantly recognize now. They were talking about books they loved, tagging them with things like hashtag book recommendations,
Yeah.
and doing those very personal, if you like this book, you absolutely have to read that one kind of pairings.
And it's the scale of that reader-to-reader conversation that just forced the industry to sit up and pay attention. Hashtags like hashtag BookTok didn't just get thousands of views. They exploded. We're talking billions of views very quickly. Suddenly, you have this massive global audience all organized around book recommendation.
And that's where the money started talking, basically. Nobody in publishing predicted this. I mean, a platform famous for dance challenges and lip syncing becoming the single most powerful book marketing engine they'd ever seen. It was unthinkable. Publishers were completely, utterly caught off guard. You had books that had been sitting quietly in warehouses for years, suddenly seeing demand just skyrocket, a spike so intense, honestly, that the supply chain just couldn't keep up. You saw constant out-of-stock notices for titles that were, for all intents and purposes, considered retired.
Wow. That kind of structural upheaval really brings us to the crucial question, doesn't it? Why is BookTok so uniquely effective? Like, why does it drive actual purchases so much better than, say, a really successful traditional book club or even a big online forum?
I think it boils down to the difference between hearing a sales pitch and, well, witnessing an emotional breakdown. It sounds dramatic, but
Yeah.
traditional book marketing often relies on critical reviews, maybe some glossy promo copy, what feels polished, right? Maybe a bit distant. But when you stumble across a video of a stranger, just a regular person, sobbing over a plot twist,
Right.
or literally screaming about a cliffhanger, you're witnessing this raw, authenticated peer trust. You immediately think, wow, if this book made that person feel that strongly, maybe it'll hit me the same way.
That's a really profound point. The sources definitely stress that. The driver is just pure, unadulterated, relatable reaction. It's not the author trying to sell you their work. It's other readers doing the heavy lifting, that emotional validation piece. Showing off stacks of books they just bought because someone else recommended them with such passion. That sincerity, that's the engine, right? That converts viewers into buyers.
And that sincerity has very, very measurable results. This is where we see this phenomenon that the industry calls the backlist bump.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone not deep in publishing lingo, the backlist just refers to books published in previous seasons, usually ones that are more than a year old. Historically, yeah, these older titles bring in steady revenue, but they very rarely hit the major bestseller lists again.
But BookTok just completely changed that whole equation.
Completely. It shattered it. BookTok is directly, undeniably linked to sales spikes that have put titles onto the New York Times and USA Today bestseller lists years after their original print runs. We're talking about authors like Colleen Hoover, whose backlist basically became the bestseller list for a while, or Madeline Miller with The Song of Achilles years after publication, Taylor Jenkins Reid, same thing. These older, previously published books saw these massive, sustained resurgences, specifically because of viral BookTok buzz.
Okay, so if that's the power it has with the backlist, it does raise an important question, one the sources touch on too. Is BookTok fundamentally reshaping what readers even look for? Is it pushing tastes towards that high emotion content and maybe potentially ignoring really high quality new literary fiction that just doesn't translate well into a 30-second, teary video?
Mm.
Is it creating a kind of cultural echo chamber where only books that guarantee those big visceral reactions can really succeed?
That is precisely the tension that the sources highlight. The platform isn't like a general bookstore covering everything equally. It's a highly specialized engine, and certain types of content just thrive there. We see really clear genre dominance, romance, obviously huge, a burgeoning subgenre people are calling romantasy,
Romantasy. Okay, break that down.
romantic fantasy. Think fantasy worlds, magic, quests, but with a very, very strong romantic relationship arc at the core. Then you've got young adult fantasy, of course. Dark academia has become a big one. And thrillers.
Dark academia. That sounds intriguing, but maybe a bit niche for the uninitiated.
It sounds niche, but it has the perfect aesthetic for a visual platform like TikTok. Dark academia generally means fiction set in these elite, often old educational institutions, think universities, boarding schools. It often features themes of mystery, obsessive scholarship, dusty libraries, classical references, and sometimes, tragic outcomes. But the key thing is, all these genres, romantasy, dark academia, thrillers, romance, they lend themselves perfectly to the format. They have highly specific visual aesthetics people can recreate. They have swoon-worthy quotes you can put on screen, dramatic plot twists that are easy to tease.
Gotcha. So it's not just about writing a good book anymore. It kind of has to fit the platform's vibe. Success means slotting into the community's existing trends, producing something inherently shareable.
Absolutely. It's crucial. Readers on TikTok aren't just browsing for any book. They're often actively seeking out and creating content around these specific emotional niches. You see trends like books that absolutely broke me, or 5-star reads I literally can't stop thinking about, or very specific viral tropes like enemies to lovers recommendations, which is massive in romance and fantasy. If your book can slot neatly into one of those clearly defined, highly emotional lanes, the community itself basically does the marketing for you. They'll propel it forward.
Okay, let's pivot then to the industry itself, because the sources describe, well, a pretty classic publishing reaction pattern, right? Initial confusion, maybe a little bit of dismissal, followed by total surrender once those sales numbers became impossible to ignore. What did that adaptation actually look like on the ground?
Oh, the change has been comprehensive. It's hit both retail and internal strategy. On the retail side, it's super visible. You walk into a physical bookstore now, especially the big chains like Barnes & Noble, and you'll see whole tables, sometimes whole sections, specifically labeled as seen on TikTok. They're directly translating that digital discovery into physical shelf space.
Yeah, I've seen those. But I imagine the changes go way deeper than just rearranging tables, right? What about inside the actual publishing houses? The strategy shifts.
Oh, it's a complete overhaul of the marketing playbook for many imprints. Publishers have set up dedicated teams, sometimes just called TikTok liaisons. Their whole job is to track trends and build relationships. They're now aggressively recruiting BookTok influencers for early reviews, sometimes even paying them significant amounts. And they're carving out specific marketing budgets for what they call TikTok-first campaigns, designing the launch around potential virality on the platform.
And I noticed the sources mentioned sending out special edition ARCs. Okay, first, for anyone who might not know, what's an ARC? And why is a special one such a big deal?
Right, so ARCs are advanced reader copies. Traditionally, these are sort of basic, uncorrected proof versions of a book. They get sent out months before publication to professional reviewers, librarians, booksellers, to generate early buzz. But sending special edition ARCs, maybe with exclusive covers or those sprayed colored edges that look great on camera to big BookTok influencers, that's different. Publishers are giving them a visually appealing, almost like a coveted object to show off in their videos. It creates hype and status and FOMO, fear of missing out, long before the regular book even hits the shelves. It's weaponizing aesthetics, really.
Which leads right into the alt-title author's dilemma, doesn't it? This new expectation for writers to suddenly become content creators.
It's a huge shift, a really fundamental change in the job description for many. Some authors are embracing it.
Yeah.
They're actively making TikToks, showing their writing process, the aesthetic of their book, maybe funny behind-the-scenes takes on their characters. They're essentially marketing themselves and their personal brand just as much as their actual manuscript. Others, though, particularly authors established before the TikTok era, really struggle with it or actively resist it. It's
Yeah.
not what they signed up for. But the overall strategic conclusion for pretty much every player in the industry, publishers, agents, authors, seems undeniable now. Ignoring BookTok, just hoping it goes away, that's no longer a viable option. Its power to generate demand almost instantly is just too significant.
Okay, now we absolutely have to shift to the critical view. Because nothing this disruptive, this successful, comes without some structural critiques. And the sources do highlight two main controversies that, we need to address impartially.
Definitely. The first critique, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is that genre narrowness. Critics argue pretty convincingly, I think, that BookTok overwhelmingly favors these high-emotion, plot-driven, aesthetically pleasing genres. And this creates a really challenging environment for, say, literary fiction, serious narrative nonfiction, or maybe quieter, more character-driven novels. These kinds of books often just don't translate easily into that immediate, visually engaging, highly emotional content that tends to go viral on the platform.
So the platform isn't necessarily reflecting the full spectrum of literary quality or diversity, but it's kind of dictating which books are deemed shareable and therefore get the visibility.
Okay, and what about the second main critique? That performance pressure on the authors themselves. Yeah, that's a really serious concern, and it honestly extends beyond just publishing into the broader creator economy. It puts this immense pressure on authors to constantly perform on social media. I mean, writing is, by its nature, often a solitary, intensely focused, intellectually demanding pursuit. When writers feel they have to spend hours every day making videos, trying to keep up with trends, engaging with comments, it inevitably cuts into the time, and maybe more importantly, the mental bandwidth needed for the actual hard work of crafting the next book.
That sounds like a really difficult trade-off. You potentially gain massive marketing reach, but you might lose focus on the core creative endeavor itself.
Precisely. And this whole situation, this massive influence, raises a really important long-term question. Will it last?
All right.
Is BookTok's huge decentralized power going to stick around, or is it destined to fade, maybe like some previous cultural kingmakers have?
We've definitely seen other major power centers rise and fall in the book world. The sources frame this against historical phenomena like, the enormous sustained influence of Oprah's book club back in the day, or Reese's Picks more recently. Those are still powerful, absolutely, but they operate through centralization, right? One curator, one list. Book Talk feels fundamentally different.
That's the absolute key difference. The traditional big book clubs are controlled, curated by a single, very influential tastemaker. BookTok's taste is dictated by millions of users, by constantly shifting, ephemeral trends driven largely by readers themselves. It's decentralized. So the big question is whether that collective, almost democratic taste, which is also very youth-driven right now, can actually maintain this kind of market dominance long-term. Or will the focus just shift entirely to the next big platform, whatever that might be, taking the sales momentum along with it?
So bringing it all together, what does this entire whirlwind really mean for the people at the heart of it, the ones actually consuming and creating these stories? For readers, I mean, the upsides seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah, for readers, the benefits are pretty clear. You get way more discovery, right? Finding books you might never have stumbled upon otherwise. You see these hidden gems, these backlist books, finding vibrant new life years after they were published. And there's a global sense of community excitement around the actual act of reading, and it's made reading feel, dare I say, kind of cool and social again for a new generation.
Definitely. And for writers, particularly maybe independent or self-published authors, this seems like where the real opportunity shines through.
Huge opportunity. Viral success, BookTok proves, no longer requires landing a massive marketing budget from a major publishing house. A single influential video, and it doesn't even have to be made by the author, can genuinely change a career trajectory almost overnight.
The sources seem to summarize the sort of new marketing mandate pretty brilliantly, I thought. It's like writers now have to think less about traditional literary criticism and maybe more about the inherent shareability of their work.
Exactly. Can it hook readers emotionally in just a few words for video? Does the story or setting lend itself well to a compelling visual aesthetic? That kind of mindset shift, thinking about the book as potential content, seems pretty much non-negotiable now for anyone hoping to break through all the noise.
Wow. This has been such a fascinating deep dive into how technology can just completely upend, well, an ancient industry like publishing. Book Talk didn't just add another platform or community. It feels like it completely flipped the script. It proved, pretty definitively, I'd say, that Genuine grassroots enthusiasm, driven purely by peer validation, can actually outsell the most polished, most expensive corporate marketing campaigns. The reader, maybe for the first time in a long time, really feels like they have the steering wheel.
And if we connect that to the bigger picture, it forces us to consider a really profound and maybe slightly uncomfortable shift. The next global phenomenon, the next massive bestseller, might not originate from some exclusive marketing boardroom or a carefully planned publishing strategy session. It might just bubble up from a regular reader sitting in their bedroom sharing, maybe tearfully, maybe excitedly, just how much a story impacted them emotionally. And that single act could drive millions of dollars in sales. So what does this radical, maybe even chaotic, democratization of taste ultimately mean for the future of literary standards, how we even define great literature moving forward? That's definitely something to mull over next time you're browsing those as seen on TikTok tables